I'm Ivonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of Moon Counselling. But out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Today we are joined by Alex and Sarah.
Hi.
You may remember Alex from our second episode on life transitions, and this will be Sarah's first time being here, so thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I just finished my internship here. I'm on a leave until 2025. Really excited to come back. Mm-hmm. I am married and I have a couple rescue puppies and kitties, and I'm a feminist.
The amazing Sarah.
The amazing Sarah. We are so happy to have you back working with us. And Alex, we're happy to have you back at the podcast. So today we are talking about imposter syndrome. I think almost everybody, most, if not every human has experienced imposter syndrome at least once in their life. Mm-hmm. And we can open up and say that we have felt imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm feeling imposter syndrome now with starting a podcast and not knowing what the hell I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us a little bit about imposter syndrome? What does that mean to you?
You want to start? You want me to start?
Sure, I can start.
Yeah, go for it.
I have to go back to my childhood because, growing up in a family with my parents were heroin addicts. Mm-hmm. So I never had any self-worth. I thought all of my self-worth came from the outside, like how I looked, how I dressed. So I really struggled, even when I started my master's, I really struggled with believing that I belonged, believing that I could do it, believing I was smart enough. So that was the first part.
Yeah.
And then when I started my placement too, never doing any clinical work or really, having much experience working with folks that have mental health concerns, mm-hmm. I really struggled with I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I don't belong here. I'm not going to help anybody. Yeah. So just, I guess that's when those are the times that I really felt like an imposter. And I think that my childhood experiences are why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Alex, how about you?
I can relate to some of those things for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think mine's a little different. I think I had way less awareness than you did at probably a younger age, for obviously different circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. But I think I had a hard time even understanding what imposter syndrome was for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't really connect it with so many other pieces in my life. As well, mine probably connect to some childhood stuff, because what doesn't?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think mine came full tilt probably when I went into my master's, because I felt pretty secure in my job before. I worked in healthcare before, so I felt really good about that. I felt pretty secure in my undergrad, other than it's your undergrad and it's exhausting. But when I hit my master's and knew that I had to come into placements, I was terrified. I remember coming on my first time for my interview here at Moon Counselling, and I definitely remember it not being a good morning. Before I came in, there was a lot of anxiety, and there's still anxiety every day. Mm-hmm. I think I often have conversations with so many people on this team about feeling like I'm not doing something that's enough, I guess. Mm-hmm. Or feeling like I have to constantly be more than what I'm already offering, which it's not easy to be in that place, right? Imposter syndrome is horrible. We all feel like it's horrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But part of the journey, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that imposter syndrome, I think, showed up for me a long time before I realized what it was. Because I had been working in the same job for 15 years and I knew that I wanted more. I knew that I could do more, be more. And there were all these opportunities that I wanted to take and I never did because I don't think I was consciously aware of that fact that like I can't do this or I don't think that I'll be successful. But I didn't pursue my goals or my dreams or moving forward or growing in that respect. Because I think that imposter syndrome or those feelings of inadequacy like held me back.
Yeah, I would agree. I think too, like in my master's program, graduating from my master's program, going into agency work where I was there with people who've been working there for years and feeling like I'm never going to know or be at their level. When I started this practice, huge imposter syndrome. Do I have what it takes to be a business owner? Is that something I should be doing? Or what if people find out that I'm faking it this whole time? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And like just all of those kinds of questions definitely came up. And now with the podcast. And I think even outside of the podcast, it happens in the therapy room too. I think we all care so much about our clients and we want to be able to support them the best we can. And sometimes when we get stuck or we're unsure what to do or the situation is completely out of our control and we can only just hold space for our client, we do feel like, oh no, I'm not being enough. I'm not showing up for my client with what they need. And that can be really hard. And like you mentioned, Alex, it can be a difficult place for us to be in. It can freeze us. And it can, be really, really hard. So I thought maybe we'll start off by, everyone probably has an idea of what imposter syndrome is, but just in case you don't, imposter syndrome is when you doubt your own skills and success. So it's like when you feel like you're not talented or worthy as others believe, or you're scared that one day people are going to realize that and you are, going to be called out, or they're going to realize that you're just pretending or you're a phony. So those are that is what imposter syndrome is. There's also a few different types of imposter syndrome, and I thought we could go into that for a second, just very briefly. So the first type of imposter syndrome is the perfectionist. So someone who's always looking for things to go perfectly. Slight errors are considered failures, and they can lead to feelings of shame and guilt. I think we can all raise our hand to that one. Yeah.
That might be all of them though.
The perfectionist really is, it's our concern is, how is something done? How can I do this in the best, most perfect way? And any slight mistake or error or difficulty or challenge, we can call it a failure and then not feel good. And then that kind of spirals into that shame and guilt. So yes, I think we all can relate to that one. The second one is called the expert. And it's when we seek to know everything. Our main concern is about what and how much we know or can do. In the face of like even the slightest lack of knowledge about something, we feel failure. So I think this can come up like when you're at a new job, you're not the expert in that new job on your very first day right away. And so if you feel like a question is asked and you don't really know how to answer that, that can bring up a lot of feelings of failure. Like, I didn't know how to answer that question. Oh my God, people are going to think, why did I get this job? I see you guys nodding your heads. So I think that's also something we can all relate to. The next one is called the soloist. They need to do things alone without any help from anyone. I am guilty of this one.
Also guilty.
I think especially like at home, like I'll be like, to Sam, I'll be like, hey, can you wash the dishes? And he'll be like, yep, I'll get to it in a minute. And I'm like, nope,
do it myself.
I'm going to do it my freaking self. And you didn't do this right. You didn't do this right. I end up jumping in and doing it completely alone, or trying to avoid help from my partner because like, well, no, I got it. You're in my way. I just kind of need to do it the way I need to. So the main concern for a soloist is who completes the work. If someone helps them, it can be interpreted as a sign of weakness or failure. So I don't meet that portion of it, but I have for sure in other areas. areas, maybe not in the example I just described. But with like running a business, I felt like I had to do that alone.
Yeah.
If I went to other business owners or if I went to other places around here to gain support and ask for help, they may not refer clients to me because they think that I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
And so I remember feeling that strongly when I was just by myself, starting out in private practice. The next one is called The Natural Genius. They aim to achieve their goals quickly and effortlessly, and they begin to doubt themselves and feel very ashamed when things start to feel difficult. So they really want to do it in the first try. So if they don't get it right the first time, it feels like a failure to them. And the last one is a Superman woman person. Their success is based on how many different roles they can play. So they can be a good father, good mother, good son, good child, good boss, good brother, good friend, among others. And they always work longer and don't take days off. If they can't play any of the main roles perfectly, then they feel like a complete fraud. Alex, you put your hand up for that one. Would you like to share?
I'm just trying to figure out why anybody didn't think I was Superwoman, because I thought I was. Oh man, I'm so guilty of that one.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like all of them together. Like I'm just trying to be this perfect person for, I'm telling you, it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting. Mm-hmm. Didn't realize that maybe it was fully imposter syndrome all the time. But that's okay. We're working on it slowly. But yeah, no, that's me. I think that's a huge one for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I asked online to see what other people who follow us on Instagram thought about imposter syndrome, and some of the replies we got in terms of their experiences have been at a new job, starting teaching for the first time was something that somebody said. Yeah. They said all the time in their new field, so I guess it was maybe a switch in the career path and are now studying in this new field, and not feeling like they have all the answers when they're in class. So those were, to narrow it down to those like categories, those were the majority of what individuals shared about imposter syndrome. So when do we mostly hear imposter syndrome come up, whether it's inside the therapy room or outside of it? What kind of things have we noticed when it comes to imposter syndrome and how it shows up for people or for ourselves?
I think for like, I keep on thinking about when you were talking about it, I did a huge shift coming into this job, right? Like I worked in healthcare for 11 years, and I was confident in my role, and it was like pretty catastrophic for me to like step out of that role and go into a new career, and really actually hard for me to shift. Like it's hard to change your mindset from something you've known forever, and turn it into something new. But I think it took me a little bit longer to realize that I didn't have to really. Like it wasn't even a shift I had to do. I just had to integrate them together, right? And it actually works really well when you integrate your skills together. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
But like I'm really trying to think when I hear about it in the therapy room, and I'm having a little bit of a hard time because obviously people don't come into the room being like, I have imposter syndrome, right? That doesn't really get said.
It's usually us naming it.
Right? Yeah. So I think when I really think about it, I think it centers, we see a lot of university people, individuals, goes along with that is in the entirety stress, right? And it's a lot of the times, a lot of people are doing placements and co-ops, and I hear a lot about that of like how they're supposed to be themselves.
Yeah.
How they're supposed to actually like go into this role and figure out how to like not be seen, which is interesting, I guess, when I hear it, because of course we want people to be seen, right? We want people to be themselves. We want people to be able to come in and learn the way they want to learn, or show people new skills, maybe. But I do find a lot that I hear that people are just trying to stay under the radar. They're just like, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to lose my job. And I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about it in session, it's very much trying to remind people that like imposter syndrome is kind of normal, right? Like it's normal to feel like you're not going to be great at everything. That's why we constantly try and get better at things. So I don't know. I think that's probably the most I hear about it right now anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same for me. I think I do have one client who named it imposter syndrome. And that was because she was starting a placement, working as a therapist, and she had never done clinical work before.
Yeah.
So, you know, a new experience.
And something relatable to us, because like
absolutely.
we just shared in the introduction, like we've definitely felt that way before.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think like imposter syndrome, that term is being used a lot more.
Yes.
Like we see it now a lot more on social media. It's being discussed more. It's saying like, oh, I'm feeling like imposter syndrome about this. Sometimes it's accurate and that's like the correct definition to describe how they're feeling, and other times it's not.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think sometimes we need to re-educate people just to let them know what imposter syndrome actually is and what it feels like and how it can impact us, because at times it can be quite paralyzing when we are experiencing imposter syndrome, because there's just so much anxiety that shows up with it. I mean, some of the things that we talked about just now is guilt and shame. Guilt and shame can paralyze us. It can make us feel like we are not good enough to be doing what we need to be doing or what is in front of us at that moment. And that can be, again, like challenging to continue to move past if we are going to class or if we're showing up at a new job or if we're doing a placement. And so, yeah, like I will say it is being discussed more, which is great. But just trying to find those areas where it's actually like the correct term of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think both of you mentioned kind of noting your childhood as something that impacted your imposter syndrome. And I think that, yes, like definitely how we grew up, the stress on achievements or success, the focus on perfectionism, or, you know, parents placing their wishes or their dreams onto their kids, can bring up like that feeling of, I have to do this, but I don't maybe feel like I could, or I have to do this perfectly to appease my parent, to make the teachers happy, all of this. And sometimes it doesn't really feel like it aligns with us and who we are. Sometimes we can also get mixed messages about a role that we may play, which can be really confusing as a child, and can come up afterwards when we're feeling like we're not enough for a certain role. So I think in childhoods where maybe people are overly praised, so everything that they do is completely perfect, can add a lot of anxiety to constantly maintain that perfect streak into their adulthood and with their career and with every part of their life. But also criticism. If you're constantly criticized as a kid, that's obviously going to have a similar feeling. You're constantly going to feel like you're not being good enough, or like you're always having to put on a mask, and so you feel like a fraud when you're going out and doing certain work.
For me as a child, it was that my parents were, I guess, neglectful and not really interested in what I was doing at any point in time. So I wasn't praised. I wasn't, told that I wasn't good enough. I just wasn't told anything. Right. And, you know, as a kid, we internalize everything that happens around us in our household. So for me, it was more like no one is telling me how I'm doing, and I'm growing up with parents who are neglectful and, don't care about me or don't love me. So that must mean that I'm not good enough for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. It's like all of those three things, like the criticism, the neglect, the overly praising parents, like it's all in the extremes. Right? Like,
absolutely.
It's great to praise your kids. Obviously, kids need attention, but to overly praise can do them a disservice, right? Or cause a lot of anxiety, or create perfectionism in their personality and how they see themselves with other people. And then the same thing for criticism, right? Like, it's kind of like those extremities that can impact us as kids. And
absolutely.
You're right. Like, we look at our parents to kind of, get attention, feel loved, feel empowered, like all of those things. So when we don't have it, or when we have it certain ways, it's really challenging.
And I look to our parents even just to know how we're doing. Right? Is this right? Is this wrong?
Like that validation piece.
And also I didn't grow up with any boundaries. So, is what I'm doing okay? I don't know. Is it? So it was confusing and difficult to get to a place where I could develop my own sort of worth and understanding of value and not necessarily right and wrong, but having boundaries and
the kind of direction, right? Where to go next.
Exactly.
Mine's different. And I mean, I'll share it because I think it's important to see the different dynamic in a home and to see how it can still affect us. I grew up with a single mom, so my mom was actually extremely validating, extremely helpful. I had a healthy relationship with my mom. It was more or less my dad leaving the home and kind of always meeting that need of feeling like I had to overachieve to be able to, I guess, feel like I was doing enough or feel like I was...
Like gain attention?
Yeah, like in a way, I think... and whether that was the case or not, that was the way that I was feeling. And I think I've realized it now more that I'm older. I obviously didn't really see those things when I was younger, but looking back now and doing my own work, right, I've started to understand that still to this day, even in university and even in the job I do now, there's always going to be those pieces that come through where I'm like internally, like deep down wishing that like that parent is going to be proud of me. I'm going to be doing enough to make sure that I'm being noticed, I guess, as their child and still, like being part of their life and feeling like I'm important. A huge piece of mine is actually not from family. And I say childhood still because I was a child. Being a young mom and being in a very unhealthy relationship really cemented that imposter syndrome in every aspect of my life, and always trying to, I guess, repair for so long after that relationship. It's really hard to repair from something that you don't fully understand when you're still kind of a child. So I didn't have a good like layout to be able to actually understand what was going on and how to give myself that compassion and love and care back. I was busy taking care of my own child, right?
I was like I say that
I didn't have the time for it. So
well, and also by the time you maybe got to the age where you could start like looking at yourself differently and giving yourself value and whatnot, you had to give that to somebody else.
Absolutely. So I mean, and I'm still in that struggle, right? I'm in my 30s. I'm working in practice. I've done so much work in my own education and my own health and everything, and I'm still working every day to try and be better and to try to remind myself that like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And it's a hard thing to do when you're constantly thinking about the negative things that are sitting there, and I know many of our clients know about those negative thoughts and everything else that comes through and the expectations, and like having a hard time getting away from that and trying to like retrain our brains to think at least a little bit kinder. But I think it's important to see the distinction, like obviously from your childhood to mine, and how you can have something so helpful and it still doesn't work out perfectly, right? It doesn't mean, like, that's the number one thing I hear a lot of the times is a lot of my clients are like, no, my parents aren't bad people. And I always have to remind them, there's no judgment ever. I don't think your parents are bad people ever. I don't think our families are bad. I don't think they intended to do any harm. I think they did what they were able to do at times. And there's so much more that goes into that. But I think it's okay for us to sit here and be like, our lives weren't perfect. We're still here. We still have the ability to do something and change it. And we might seem put together every time our clients see us, and I'm flattered. All the time I'm flattered. I love everybody for telling me that I'm put together.
It does make me laugh though,
it
when
does.
clients are like, you probably have your shit together, and I'm like, you're hilarious.
That's what I feel. I have some clients that are like, not you, you're amazing, and I'm like, I needed to hear that today because I feel like I am failing. I'm like,
thanks for that validation.
I like go home and I tell my daughter, and I'm like, guess what my client told me today? That I'm amazing. And she's like, okay, Mom. I need to hear it sometimes. I'm not perfect. Even though all the money has gone into all the work to do the schooling, it doesn't do anything for like my self-compassion and like believing that I'm enough. How many times have I had a conversation with you, Sarah, about the fact that I'm like, I don't think I should be doing this. And you're like, oh my goodness, you're fine. It's fine. And I'm like, I don't know. Tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah.
It happens, right? Like, it's messy. Everything's messy.
I mean, we're humans, right? We are humans, and we're gonna feel doubt. We're gonna feel, and I think too, with our work, we care so much about our clients. Like, we wish that we could snap our fingers and they can have what they are needing in that moment.
Every day I wish that.
Every day. And I tell my clients, I'm like, I wish
So do I.
badly.
I'm like, if I could snap my fingers and fix everything,
Yeah.
you'd never have to see me again. And I love that for you.
And that's literally our job. We are trying to help our clients have the tools so they don't need to come and see us anymore.
We work ourselves out of a job every day.
We do.
That's my goal.
That is our goal, literally. But I do think, like, thank you for sharing your experience, because I think sometimes when I'm imagining, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm imagining that as a young mom, you felt like an outsider because you were not doing the same things that other people in your life were doing, right? Like your peers. And that can cause a lot of imposter syndrome in both ways, right? Like imposter syndrome, I'm a young mom, I have no freaking idea what I'm doing here. And oh my God, I'm a young mom. I'm missing out on all of these cool experiences that I should be having or that my peers are having. And then that can, like, that feeling of an outsider in both of those environments is like that, like that's where the imposter syndrome can come up too. Or even if you do go to hang out with friends and you're like, oh no, this isn't me anymore. I have a kiddo, I have to leave here, or I'm breastfeeding. Like all of these other responsibilities that you have, that feeling of being an outsider can definitely like just amp up that imposter syndrome a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think like instantly when you said that, I'm like, I was so isolated. Right? Like, I mean, like I was 17 years old. I started my life again and got out of that relationship when I was 20. I think I was 20 years old when I left. My daughter was 3. So isolated. I had so many friends, but I was like one of the few that already had a child. That had been through quite a lot of experiences that made me have to grow up really quickly. So isolated. And the thing that I know now, did not know then, because isolation is a horrible place to be. What I know now is what I didn't have that I needed was like a healthy community base. Like I didn't have a friend group. I didn't have people that I could rely on, and I didn't want to share, right? I had so much shame and guilt around that area, which doesn't help with that imposter syndrome already. But I had no community to lift me from it, which was huge for me. And like, that's a journey in itself, right? Like, and we'll talk about that later in the next podcast of female friendships, but it is hard to hold community and friendships, and after you've had substantial things happen that pull you away from people that can't relate, it sometimes reinforces that idea that you're not good enough or that nothing is going to matter, right? Like it happens.
Or like that fraud feeling. Like I think that's huge for imposter syndrome, is like somebody's going to find me out. And again, like my childhood was great, I think, like from what I remember. There's been times with my mom where as an adult I've had to set boundaries, because at times she can be like, you know, she's like a typical Latina mom, so she's giving you like criticism as like advice, and that got really frustrating. But it wasn't until I got older and I realized, like, Mom, like you're criticizing me, or don't give me that look like you're wearing that to work. And I'm like, Mom, come on, like just don't do this.
Just tell me I look nice.
Just tell me I look okay, or like that I look nice, or just don't say anything at all. But I think like where my imposter syndrome came up a lot was around creating this business. It was around like, do I even have the tools, the capabilities? Like I remember going and like meeting with other with meeting other colleagues in the area, and I would ask for support or guidance, and they felt so knowledgeable. And I'm like, oh God, what? Like, what do you mean a business number? What is that? Where do I get that? How do I do that? A business account? Okay, what do I do? How do I do this? How do I do that? And there was a lot of like needing to learn. And it wasn't that these people I was going to for support were making me feel this way, but that was my own inner like thoughts or my own inner criticism of, you don't know what you're doing. maybe you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to overcome and to be like, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try and I'm going to learn and I'm going to try my best and see what happens. But it took a lot of time, which is why it's easy for me to say, I have no idea what I'm doing with this podcast. Hopefully people like it and can relate to it and feel some validation in it.
I mean, I like it.
Thank you. But even listening back to the very first episode yesterday, I'm like, no, cringe. I sound dumb that like no one's going to listen to this. I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. And that imposter syndrome definitely showed up. And I talked to Sarah about it and she's like, no, Ivonne, it's probably going to be great. And Alex, you have said the same thing. And everyone I talked to is like, nope, don't go back and listen to the first one because it was your first one. You were scared. You were nervous. Like all of those feelings were coming up. But
I'll also have you know that I have multiple people waiting to hear this, okay?
Oh, I'm so excited. That's awesome. But yeah, so imposter syndrome can be also a little bit, or we may feel it a little bit more if we have feelings of anxiety, low self-esteem, or we struggle with perfectionism. Because obviously with anxiety, that critical voice, our thoughts, all of that is telling us that we are not enough, or we are going to be found out, or people know more than we do right now. So what have been some of those thoughts that either you have felt or that you think or have heard someone else feel when imposter syndrome comes up? So I think like believing that other people know more than you is a big one.
So for me, it wasn't, I guess that was a little bit when I started my master's, but for me, it was really, really rooted in self-doubt and low self-worth. So I think the main thought was, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And when I started my placement here, it was, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a therapist. Like, you're not taught how to be a therapist. Like, people would ask me, oh, did you learn how to be a therapist in school? No. A master's of social work does not teach you how to be a therapist.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want it to at this point either.
No.
I always say that. I'm like, why didn't it teach me these skills?
No,
I want it.
No, absolutely not.
No.
I would much rather learn about social justice and, equity, equality, and all those things than how to be a therapist.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. But just that I didn't know what I was doing, and I was worried about, when I started working with clients, like, what do I say? What do I do? And because you don't know what somebody's going to say in a session or how the session's going to go. And
I remember that. I think for both of you, it's been so amazing for me as your supervisor to kind of see the growth that you've had.
Yeah. Because
both of you came in scared. Both of you came in being like, I don't know what I'm doing. And with those questions, exactly like you said, Sarah, like, what do I say?
Yeah.
Like, what if this happens in a session? I'm like, just be a human first, validate, make them feel safe, create that space, and then it'll flow and you will be okay. And I think it was like the confident turnaround that I saw from when you started to where you're at now has been huge and amazing. And I think that that's important, kind of like what you said too, Alex, like community, having people that you can share and you can communicate with and say like, I don't know what I'm doing, and having people like you guys and other people in my life who've said like, it's okay that you don't know what you're doing with the podcast, it's going to be great, or you're going to do it, or someone's going to connect to it, someone's going to relate to it, or for me to tell you guys like, you guys are going to be great, you guys are amazing humans, you guys are great at listening, at validating, like supporting, at all of those things. And those really are the top skills that you need when you go into the therapy room. And so I think like definitely a community is really important when we are trying to heal from imposter syndrome, or at least combat imposter syndrome, because I think we need to validate that we're going to feel imposter syndrome. It might not fully 100% go away. It might just not be as loud the next time we go to do something, but it might still be there, like this annoying little thing just sitting on your shoulder. Like it might still be there, but it's just not going to be as loud.
I remember when you started, you listened to a few of my sessions, and your comments were like, oh, you were really good at validating, or you were really good at reflecting, and I'm like, I did that. Like, I didn't even know. But that's the thing. Like, I didn't even know that I was doing those things.
Yeah.
So sometimes, like, just reflecting on that now, even like during this podcast, I'm like, I already had all that stuff in me. Like, I did know what I was doing. I did know, how to quote unquote be a therapist.
Yeah.
But it was only after, like, being in community and having somebody listen to what I was saying and say, oh, actually, like, you are doing those things and you're doing them well.
Yeah.
I think it's like perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because for anyone, even for like these individuals who shared a little bit about when they experience imposter syndrome at a new job, you have this perception that other people are going to want you to be a teacher in this way.
Yes.
Or they're going to want you to be a good employee in this way. And so we can get really stuck in just like, how am I going to be a good therapist? How am I going to be a good teacher? How am I going to be a good like worker, employee, whatever it can be in these different fields? And we forget that there's a lot more than just knowing a textbook from front to the back, right? Like, we show up as humans. You are really great at communicating with people, and that was something that naturally came into this field.
Yeah.
A teacher may be really great at connecting with kids, but that may not be something that they consider as being a good teacher on paper, right? So I think that that is very much based on our thoughts and our perceptions and what we think other people expect from us without like actually asking them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we can build up this fear or this shame or this guilt because we feel like we are not meeting what their expectations of us may be.
Yeah.
When in reality, we are. It's just not in this like, kind of more black and white way that we are seeing it.
It's not a sign that shows up on our forehead, right? Like I don't know. I think mine was like a very different way of coming into kind of understanding when I was starting to deal with those like moments that I was like, ooh, this is not going to be good. Or, ooh, you're not going to be able to do this. It has to go back like for a bit, but like this is my third career. So my first career, like I loved, I was good at it. It just didn't work as a young mom, right? I switched it over. That was the only reason. But I went into something that really, like with healthcare, working as a PSW, I jumped into honing my skill as like caring for people. Yeah. Because I've always been a carer. Like that's just who I am. So my issue was when I worked at my previous employer for 8 years. And I was working here when that happened, actually. Like I came into this situation, and it really like hit tenfold. Like I was already feeling like pretty terrified being here. I remember being very anxious when I started.
I remember too. I'm like, girl, stop being anxious. You're good. Like things are fine.
Yeah, and like I'm gonna be honest, I'm a pretty anxious person, and I start to get a little like sweaty, and shaky, and all those horrible things that everybody knows what they feel like. Happens to me too. You're welcome. But I remember like feeling excited, terrified, but excited. But I was still very much at that point where you're like, you're gonna start, and I was like, in a few weeks. Yeah. Like, we're fine.
Yeah, I remember.
There was a point where you were like, no, okay, you're doing it. And I was like, okay. And like, I booked clients. It was good. It was fine. But I felt okay because I was like, this is like, okay, I'm just showing up for people. I'm really bringing myself into this. I promised myself I was going to do that. And then I like had to leave my job of 8 years. And I was like, oh, this is this one thing that I'm really good at. And I have to leave it. Yeah. And I'm like, I can't leave something I'm really good at because what am I going to, like, what if I don't succeed? Now I've let go of something that I've put my whole world into. Yeah. And then I cried. I know. And then I cried, and then I cried for like a week, okay? Like, it was horrible. It was the worst decision I ever had to make when it came to, like, employment. Also, I will say on the other end of it, like a year and 6 months later, best decision I've ever made. But not the point.
In the moment, though. In the moment, it's terrifying.
It was horrible. Yeah. And I felt literally in that moment, that was like kickstart. that moment, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna fail. Like, this is what I know. I chose something I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And, you know, my journey of like stepping into the uncomfortable, horrible place to be, also needed place.
Yeah.
And then you got me to let you come in on a session. And I was like, oh, why don't we just cancel the session?
Got me.
You were just like...
Took a lot of convincing.
It did. Because literally in that moment, I was like, oh my God, she's going to realize that I literally have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah. And the same thing as Sarah said. You were like, you were really good at this, and you were really good at this. And I wish I could remember all the words, but it was so long ago.
And you were like, I didn't even know I was doing that.
I honestly can't even remember, because the only thing I focused on was I was like, oh, but I know every single time you said something positive to me, I was like, I know, but I didn't do this.
Yeah.
I reinforced myself with so much negativity right off the bat that I didn't even give myself space to feel good about it. Mm-hmm. And then you get the interns to shadow my session. And I don't know why you'd be so horrible, but it was horrible. No, it was fine. In the moment, I was like, how dare you?
Yeah.
But I remember you guys sitting in on it.
Yeah.
And after, I was like, and like, one of the sessions that I have a very clear rapport with my client.
Yeah.
And after, they were like, wait, is that supposed to happen? And I was like, ooh, I should have gave you guys a heads up of how this goes. And they questioned me. Yeah. And they asked questions. And I actually don't remember like crumbling. I was like, no, I literally did it for this reason. Mm-hmm. This is why I didn't question that.
Like your expertise came out. You were like, I know this.
Like instantly I was like, I don't question any of it. And I was like, if this would have switched the response, I would have questioned it. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, no, I got this. I have to teach them that it's okay.
Yeah.
Still hated it. Still am going to hate it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the worst point. You start to realize like, oh my God, now people get to actually question me, and they get to actually see that like maybe we're doing things differently. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not perfect. Maybe it is messy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're messy. Mm-hmm. Our clients know they're messy sometimes. Sometimes we're like, what are we doing here? And you know that.
Things are complicated, yeah.
But like, if I didn't have those things, I don't think I'd be sitting here right now. Especially not doing this podcast, I promise you that. That took a lot of convincing.
We're all doing this kind of nervous. So.
Yeah. But
I don't feel nervous.
Okay, well, Sarah's just amazing, I guess.
She just has like a cool cucumber
She's a unicorn.
all the time. Gotta like pull some of the energy from her. But I like, coming back to what you said about community, I would not have been able to sit at this table or even do all the time I've done here without being given like you, Deanne, Destiny, to be able to actually learn from. Because I started here when there was just the three of you. Yeah. And it was so close knit, and I was able to actually have conversations with people and not feel judged and not feel like I was doing something wrong. Everybody feels the same way. And now sitting in like, what is it, 11 people right now on this team? Like, little round of applause there, but 11 people, and there's not a day where I sit here where I don't feel like I can talk to somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The fact that you have that many people in your corner. Yeah. Like, we sit here and we're like, oh, this happened. And they're like, same. And you're like, oh, thank God. Yeah. Right? Like, it's validating. It feels good.
It does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, I think that's so important.
I like what you said, though, that letting go of this thing you felt super confident in is when like the imposter syndrome started kicking in. But you may have experienced that imposter syndrome at the beginning of that place, and it took you that long to build that confidence, and then it became scary to let go. And I think that like sometimes our imposter syndrome is going to come up in those moments where we are in change, or where we're in a season of change or a season of figuring things out, or putting ourselves in new experiences. But community is huge. So now if we go into, we just talked all about how we feel imposter syndrome. Hopefully that was all validating to you. But now what do we do with that? How can we combat imposter syndrome or get some relief from imposter syndrome? And I think one of the biggest things that we have kind of focused on is community. Learning from team members, like you described, not being scared to share how you're feeling.
Why are you looking at me like straight in the eyes?
I didn't mean
She's outing me.
But not being scared to like communicate that, right? To be like, I'm I don't know what I'm doing. I am feeling really scared.
Yeah.
This is new for me. I'm, what are you looking for? What are your expectations of this? Because I feel like you expect me to be like this, and that's really scaring me. Obviously, that also depends on like the rapport you have with that person. But being able to learn from other people, I think, is big.
Yeah.
Also, understanding if that person is able to give you what you need.
Yeah.
If you're searching for something from a person that doesn't have the capacity to help you,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to be helpful for either one of you.
So like knowing who to talk to. Yeah, for sure.
And like different circumstances call for different people. That's okay. And you know how I always go, every single time we talk about something, I'm always like, we get to share this messy place and live in this puddle together. Like, there's so many people around us that are feeling the same thing.
Yeah.
You're never alone in your feelings.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, is because we would constantly hear within ourselves, clients, whoever, just share how they were feeling and feeling really alone in it. And we're like, we just heard 5 people say that they also feel alone. But obviously for ethical and confidentiality purposes, we can't put you guys together in a room to be like, you all feel the same way. So
I would love to do that, but I cannot do that.
I know, in like a fantasy world, that would be really fun. But another thing to kind of do that we talked about also to combat imposter syndrome is focusing on the facts, because our brains and our thoughts can spiral out of control at times, and it can bring up situations that aren't actually factual. So focusing in on the facts. I got hired for this position. That is a fact. I deserve to be here. They see that my qualifications meet what is required of this position, and that is the fact. The feeling is that I'm scared about starting this job, but the fact is that I'm here for a reason.
And I've done the work to get here. I've worked hard.
Something that I did with when I started my master's. So I started my master's. I did like 1 course, I think. And then I had to take a break because I was like having panic attacks. Yeah, because of, I mean, I'm sure imposter syndrome along with other, pretty sometimes crippling anxiety. And then when I went back, I started using affirmations. And I would read them over myself out loud every day, or if I'm out for a walk, I'm like reading them or I'm saying them out loud with confidence. And that really helped. Like for me to change my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, you're like reframing those affirmations, right?
Yeah. And then I think too, like when I started, and I think the hurdle sometimes with imposter syndrome is actually doing it. I feel like we all have all this greatness inside of us. And we have this idea, like, you might have this idea or desire that you want to start something, but your imposter syndrome, self-doubt, whatever, holds you back. But we all have this greatness inside of us that when we actually start doing the stuff that makes us afraid and makes us feel really uncomfortable, the more you do it, you start realizing like, oh, actually I was made to do this.
Like the confidence starts building.
Yes. So the more that now I'm almost done my master's and I'm like, oh, I'm a pro. Like I know
you're
exactly.
Good to go.
You feel that way?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. I do not.
Oh, no.
I think it's ongoing and situational for sure.
So I just like with school now, I'm just like, I am really smart. I've learned a lot. I know exactly how to be a student and what is required of me. And the same thing with placement. Like at the very beginning, I was really unsure about myself. But then when I got into working with clients, and I could see that they were changing, and I had clients stop working with me because they didn't need help anymore because we
that's the best feeling.
So I'm like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm a good therapist. I had other people telling me I'm a good therapist. So the more that I did it and the more that I overcame that discomfort and got, you have to, I feel like everything that you want is on the other side of being uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I agree.
So you're in this place of discomfort and like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you do it and then you're like, oh, actually I do know what I'm doing and I'm really good at it too. And I think so for me now, I actually feel really confident as a therapist and I'm really excited to continue to grow in my capacity as a therapist. But if I didn't start, I would never be here.
It's like the sitting through the discomfort piece that is really uncomfortable. Obviously it's discomfort, but being able to sit through it can sometimes give us so much, like such a bigger reward.
Absolutely, 100%.
Afterwards, right? Like that confidence, or even just like, I did it. I got through this first day at this new job, and it didn't kill me, or I was able to answer a question. I was able to learn something new. I was able to build one connection. And then now I have to go back tomorrow, right? Like maybe I'm still feeling that discomfort the next day, but it's not going to be as heavy or as enormous as it was the day before. And as you continue moving through that, then it gets easier and easier and easier. But definitely I love the affirmations that you mentioned, because that is a way to just kind of like rewire those thoughts and reframe those things, because just focusing in on our thoughts and what is actually factual right now. Because our brains can be so great at imagining all sorts of situations.
And also, something that I would ask myself is, who told you that? Whose voice is this? Like, whose words are these that have been spoken over you that you're internalizing? Because, we usually don't think about ourselves in such negative ways without, some sort of...
You heard it from somewhere.
Exactly. So I'm just, I really had to question, okay, is this actually true about me, or is this just something that I've believed because of my childhood or other things that have happened to me in my life? And so then I think that I, did affirmations, and then my affirmations started aligning with what I was experiencing with school and with placement, and then I, just kind of all came together.
I think we choose our path. I think we have an opportunity to choose the path we want to take, and there's obviously going to be obstacles there, but I think if you have the tools to be able to let yourself kind of know which way to go, I think that's like a really good starting point, right? Like mine absolutely is based in understanding my fear. I have the worst time actually trying to sit with what I'm feeling in that moment. I'm not always the best at being good to myself. Life happens. Sarah's my great cheerleader. She looked side-eyed me there. But I love it. I love that I'm able to have people in that corner. But I think naming for me, and actually sitting here and being like, okay, there's a reason this is happening, and what are you so afraid of? Why are you fearful of doing something wrong? And I know the answer every time. The answer every time is, I do not want to destroy somebody's life. I don't want to make somebody feel not okay. I want to make sure that when somebody leaves, they feel good. And I'm a notorious fixer, which is hard to get out of. So my immediate thing is, I have to make them feel good. We've had this conversation so many times, Yvonne. I've been like, but I have to, and I'm like, no, you don't have to make everything okay.
But also, do you feel like you have the power to make somebody feel no?
And that's the thing. I had this mentality for so long that I'm like, I have to make it better because that was my worth. Right? I was a helper.
Like the fixer,
Right? I'm like, I have to make it better because I've spent so many moments in my life being the person that's fixing everything, whether it's for my child or myself after that relationship or my clients, that now I'm at this point where I'm like, I'm fearful of not being able to take care of somebody and being able to support somebody when I need to. But then, and with the help, Sarah's been a great help, even sometimes when I'm sitting here and I'm like, reminding me, saying you know what, you can't. And how many times we hear it, I can't fix a problem I didn't create. I can help you work through it. We can help you do those things. And it's so much around being human, because fear is there. Fear is always going to be there. We can't get away from that. But I think being able to understand where it's coming from and figuring out what we're feeling in those moments is going to be helpful. And that's where the help with the affirmations comes in, and switching that mindset and being able to understand.
Sorry, even before we get there, the very first thing that you mentioned is acknowledging your feelings. We need to acknowledge our feelings of self-doubt, of fear, of anxiety, of whatever feeling we're experiencing in that moment, and validate that for ourselves. Bring in the awareness of, you know what, I am really scared about going into this new position. I am really scared of doing this presentation in front of a bunch of other experts. Being able to just have that awareness of validate that feeling for yourself. And whether it's, again, before this, another tip that we mentioned was focusing in on your or on what the facts are of the situation, even the stories that our brain is inventing or that we are kind of stuck on that aren't necessarily real. They may not be real, but the emotions that they bring up still are. So our feelings in those moments are still real. So it's important for us to kind of validate that and have compassion. I think we've said this in every single podcast, but like, you need to have compassion for yourself. You're feeling scared and you're nervous and you're feeling imposter syndrome about this new role because it is scary. It's new to you. It's your first time doing this, and that's okay. So kind of giving yourself that compassion and that permission to feel the way that you are feeling in that moment. And I think, again, another big thing that you mentioned is having somebody to talk to, somebody who's a cheerleader, somebody who's able to remind you and check in on you and be like, nope, Alex, you're doing a great job. And just kind of take you out of that funk if you're in it. And so I think within our team, we are all so supportive of one another where we can cheer each other on, or at least be like, yep, I've been there too. And that kind of validation can be so huge. So when you are combating imposter syndrome, it can be such an isolating feeling. And so talking to somebody that you trust, that you know has your back, that you feel has also the capacity to hear what you're saying, is definitely important.
I agree.
I think you have to celebrate, like, I don't know if I wanted to say celebrate, but it works. So I think it's important to celebrate the successes you have.
Yes,
right?
that was what I was going to say next.
I'm so glad. Reminding yourself that, like, there's so many good things you've done. We have a tendency to let the negative come in. It's easy. Negative is so easy.
Well, the example you just gave of me giving you praise from like listening in or sitting in on a session and you right away going in with the criticism. Like, let's just take a little moment to celebrate your accomplishment. You did your first session, for example. Like, you did it. You survived it. And it went well. The client wants to come back to see you. Or you survived your first day at the same job. Or you did the big presentation, the big scary thing. Or you released the first episode of your podcast even though you freaking hated it. Like, celebrate those moments and be able to like recognize that regardless of how big or small the accomplishment is, it's an accomplishment. And so finding some way to celebrate that with yourself.
That's hard sometimes.
It is really hard.
I did have a client that had a hard time dealing with that. And you know what we did? We printed out a good email that she got from her boss, and she pasted it on her wall every day when she went to work, and realized that she didn't have to worry about it because somebody was telling her that she was doing a good job. And it was great. And it's an easy way to even show yourself something, because it's so easy to forget.
It is.
Put it in your face. It's okay. We all have everything all over the place. Post-it notes on our phone, amazing shirts.
I recommend a lot of time, like, have a folder, either an actual folder or a folder on your phone or on your computer, where you can put like little things like letters, or for me, something I still have is a piece of art that a young client made for me at the agency that I worked, and it said "Thank you, Ivonne" on it. And I still have that. It's in an actual tangible folder. And that was huge for me at the time. And so being able to kind of pull away little things that make it a little bit easier to celebrate your accomplishment. So whether it's a note from somebody, a picture that a student made for you, or, you know, just like holding on to the memory of a bunch of people clapping at the end of your presentation, whatever it could be, just being able to jot those down. People clapped and stood, gave me standing ovation for my presentation. Not mine. I'm giving an example.
I was like, wow, good for you.
I don't like presentation.
We're already validating her
I know,
successes.
you guys are the best. No, not me. Just an example. If you are doing a presentation and you felt imposter syndrome during it, and people rose out of their chairs and clapped for you, put that in that note. Make a note. People stood and clapped for me after the presentation. People told me it was a great presentation. People told me that I was approachable. I had a great first day at work. I made a new friend, and she said that she was happy that I was there. Like, if they're not tangible things that you can hold and put into a folder, or take a picture of and put into your phone, like, write those memories down so that you have a collection of all of these good things that bring in like that ability to celebrate those successes a little bit easier.
I agree. I was just gonna say something, because I told you when we started today, that there was something that came up on my social media at the perfect time, because you know, imposter syndrome's been crazy lately. And it just had some advice. And it says, if you weren't ready, you wouldn't have the opportunity. And if you weren't capable, you wouldn't have the desire.
Yeah.
And when I read it, I was like, dang, first of all, so right. And it says like, read it again. And I did. I read it so many times because I was like, you know what? It's absolutely right. I wouldn't have been offered the opportunity to be at Moon Counselling if you didn't think I was ready to be here. And I absolutely wouldn't be capable if I didn't push through to be here. Right. And like, I think sitting with that has been really helpful for the imposter syndrome, because it's at least helping me realize that little bit of affirmation that there's a reason I'm here and I've worked my butt off for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, other than that, I'm
that.
happy to be back. Yeah, it's great. I love this one. It's vulnerable. And I hope everybody is okay with how vulnerable it is. And hopefully everybody still comes back and sees us, even though we're a mess together.
My clients already know I'm a mess. It's all over
So
my
do mine.
bio. They're like, I came to see you because you're anxious.
I love that though. I like that they
your
relate
parents
to
were
you.
drug addicts? Mine too.
Yeah.
And for me, I like lose my words constantly. So I'm in session, I'm like, I don't remember what I'm saying, or I don't know how to talk today. Like,
I'm pretty honest in mine. I'm like, it's been a long day. Words don't work. It's fine. Tell me what I need to say.
Yeah.
It's
So,
okay.
I mean, this is how you're meeting us outside of the therapy room, where we are messy and we are human and we show up anyway. So thank you so much for tuning in today, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.